Hey everybody, I'm Brittany Falkers along with Chief Meteorologist Matt Zaffino. We are giving you full coverage as we wait on this storm to come in. Matt, right now it's kind of the calm before the ice storm that we're expecting, and this is widespread freezing rain. We're already under some warnings right now.
Lots of them. Wasn't it Tom Petty who said the waiting is the hardest part?
It is.
I think it is, even though it's something that we don't want to deal with. We have about 24 hours to go before we begin to see precipitation fall. And note that I said precipitation and not necessarily snow, because while we expect it to begin as snow, I think we'll see a quick transition over to sleet and freezing rain, and that's going to be the long duration of precipitation rolling our way. I'm showing you Timberline right now, Brittany, because it's beautiful for one thing, but also it's down to 13. They just dropped 3 degrees in the last hour, which may not seem that unusual. Of course, it gets colder as the sun goes down, but this is really cold Arctic air. I'm going to show you more on the dew point temperatures too in a bit. Only 10. That's an indication of how dry the air is. This is Arctic stuff. This is like from the homeland of Brittany Falkers in Minnesota, where dew point temperatures of 10 and temperatures of 13 are common in the wintertime, but it's pretty rare for us here in the Northwest. And in fact, that's part of the reason we're seeing these strong east winds, because that cold Arctic air that is centered well east of the Cascades is very dense. It's cold, it's dense, it's thick. That creates high pressure. That creates the wind blowing away from high pressure, and that's why we get the gorge winds. Of course, it's all compounded by the terrain of the gorge, which literally acts like a giant terrestrial funnel, making the wind flow faster through that constricted area. So the winds in the gorge already 23 miles an hour at Troutdale, but we've had much higher gusts at Crown Point and up at Corbett so far. And notice the east winds are extending all the way to the coast right now. Even the coast will get some freezing rain. This is the water vapor imagery, and I haven't showed this yet, but it's fairly instructive as to what's happening. One of the sensors on the weather satellites just sees water vapor. It looks at the right wavelength to pick that up. Water vapor is invisible to the naked eye. Of course, steam you can see, but vapor you cannot. So when you see the whites and especially the greens, that tells us that the atmosphere and the clouds here are really juiced up. They're holding a lot of moisture. You see where it's dry, where the orange is out here, and that's about it. There's a lot of moisture, and then some drier air over Montana. But this high moisture content air is going to be riding up and over this cold, dry air that we have at the surface. Now, more on those dew point temperatures I was telling you about. We're at 19 in Portland, but it's 5 in the Dalles, 2 at Pendleton. So think of that in terms of the temperature. Imagine a temperature of 2. It's similar to that, but it's showing us the moisture in the air, and there's really not much at all. -3 in Spokane for the dew point temperature. It's pretty rare to get those dew points below freezing or below 0 here in the Northwest. Okay. Brittany you mentioned the winter storm warning. Guess what else we got, Brittany?
What?
It's not just a winter storm warning. We have a wind chill advisory and a wind advisory. So the wind advisory, because the winds will be so strong, gusting over 25, 30, 45 miles an hour. And the wind chill advisory, because the wind chills will be dangerous in the teens and lower in the Portland area and well below 0 up in the Cascades and in the gorge. So again, there's just a lot going on right now. I know you have some viewer questions, at least I think you do, because or either that or you're just shopping on Amazon for my Christmas present.
Well, a little bit of both. But, a lot of people are so concerned about the timing when it comes to this storm. People are hitting the stores tonight. It's very busy out there. But tomorrow, Friday, those are both traditionally very busy travel days. So about what time do we want to really make sure that we're not on the roads anymore, especially in the Mid-Willamette area here in the Portland metro? I
would say from this time tomorrow on through Thursday night and Friday, just kind of forget about it, because by Friday morning, the roads are very, very likely just going to be iced on over, and there'll likely be closures. There's likely going to be power outages around town, hopefully not widespread. It's really terrible when you lose power and the temperatures in the teens and 20s. But that's a distinct possibility. So make sure you've got firewood if that's how you heat your house, if the power goes out, whatever it is that you do, make sure you're prepared. And we've got about 24 hours before we begin to see the snow and the ice begin to fall. So again, the timing, still looking at about 3, maybe at the earliest, 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Thursday to 5 o'clock in the afternoon for the onset, for the beginning of the precipitation. And in the beginning, it won't be that bad, especially if it's snow. It'll just be, it's so dry, it'll just dust away. You'll be able to blow it off and it won't be a big deal. But as soon as we begin seeing sleet, so that's ice pellets, frozen pellets of ice that fall out of the sky, or rain, liquid water that then falls into this very, very cold sub-freezing air and freezes on contact, As soon as you see that happen, it's game over. It's time to get inside because the roads and the sidewalks and the railings and your steps at your house, anything, any surface is going to become really icy really fast under those conditions. So again, to answer that question, about sunset tomorrow and then overnight into Friday.
And of course, you mentioned it there too with the sidewalks, your entryway to your house. Do you have recommendations for folks who just even getting around outside of your house? Well, it's going to be kind of slick out there.
Yeah, to put it mildly. The thing is, if you have what we call micro spikes, which are readily available in store, I think even Fred Meyer sells them now. They're just little, stretchy kind of rubber things that you put on the bottom of your shoes that have spikes. And so that can give you traction, and they'll go on any shoe you choose to wear. Micro spikes work really, really well. There's a couple of different models out there, but you can certainly get them at REI. I'm pretty sure Fred Meyer carries them. You probably get them at like Coastal Farm and Ranch. Any kind of supply store would likely have those. I've got a pair of boots from Corkers that actually has a removable sole, and you take that one off, and it has another set of soles that has metal spikes in it. So those are really slick, and I've got those ready to go.
That's like expert level. All right, Matt, let's take some viewer questions.
I don't mess around, man. You gotta go full on.
It's smart. I've got the Yak Tracks, but I might need to upgrade.
Yak Tracks are great.
After hearing from you. All right, we've got some viewer questions coming in. I'm going to start with, let's see, Josh Pierce has a question. He's like, how about the Passover hood? How's that looking right now? And how will that be going into the future now? Right
now, it's fine. By tomorrow night, it's going to be brutal. So, driving over that's the thing about this one, too. It's interesting because the Cascades will actually get freezing rain because the freezing level is going to be going up to about 7,000 or 8,000 feet. Now, that's a little bit confusing because I'm talking about a freezing level of 7,000 or 8,000 feet, yet we will be in the 20s for the better part of the day tomorrow. So what happens is the atmosphere gets layered. Below freezing air at the surface, then a layer of above freezing air, that's the problem, and then above that, way above that, it's cold enough where the precipitation up at the clouds is beginning as snow, then turning to rain, and then falling into the sub-freezing air, which will cover the Cascade Passes because the cold layer from the ground up is fairly deep. So the Cascade Passes will go from snow to freezing rain, but interestingly enough, up in the Cascades, they'll begin to warm up sooner than we will down in the valley, and certainly sooner than the gorge, because of that warm air aloft will be realized begin to mix on down. So say Timberline and Government Camp will probably see just plain rain and temperatures above freezing before Portland and the gorge, which is weird, but it happens that way sometimes. All
right, we've got another viewer question. This one from Chloe Tenbush, and she's asking about Lebanon. How are they going to be impacted by the storm in the Lebanon area?
Yeah, so the Mid-Valley and the Southern Valley will fare a lot better than we will in the Portland area, in part because of the gorge, which just acts as a source, a fire hose of that cold air. It keeps us insulated, keeps us below freezing longer. Eugene, Lebanon, even Corvallis, you will warm up sooner by, I would say, later afternoon Friday. Places like Lebanon, certainly Eugene, and maybe as far north as even Salem will begin to get above freezing and begin to melt on out. So once you go farther south down the Willamette Valley, you're going to melt out sooner than we will in the Portland area or the gorge or the Cascades.
All right, and Lewis Dunn has a question that I think a lot of people have on their minds. Will this last through Christmas? What about Saturday, Christmas Eve, and then Christmas Day? Yeah, Christmas Eve is a little problematic for the Portland area because we may not thaw out very early on Saturday morning. What will happen is, in this case, the winds are going to die off. These strong east winds will die off, but there's going to be a lot of cold air in place, and then the ice has that insulatory effect of keeping things cold. So without a strong push of a south or westerly wind, it's going to take a while to scour out this cold air. So for Portland on Christmas Eve, I think we will get above freezing, eventually get into the 40s, but it may not be until later in the day. And depending on how much ice we get, it may take a while for that to melt away. And the gorge is notorious, of course, for hanging on to the cold air. And it may not be until Sunday, Christmas Day, before the gorge starts to get above freezing. So that's something we'll watch even very, very carefully. There have been instances, Brett, in the past where, like in the beginning, like I'd say at this point of this forecast cycle, let's say, we're saying, okay, the gorge should warm up and get above freezing by Sunday, but then it doesn't happen until Tuesday. I mean, that's what can happen in the gorge because of the terrain trapping the cold air there. So hopefully the gorge will warm up and get above freezing by Sunday, and I think that's a pretty good bet at this point. And now a lot of folks have people coming in from out of town. Faustine Reynolds actually says that they have family coming down from Seattle. They're going to be on I-5 South. They didn't say what day they're coming in, but if they're trying to come in from Seattle over Thursday, Friday, what are they going to be running into?
The same thing. I mean, it may start a little bit later up there, but it's going to be freezing rain in Seattle and all the way down the I-5 corridor. So my advice would be, if you know, nobody really wants my advice, but what I would say is this: the earlier you go, the better. The earlier they travel, the better. So if they can come in early in the day on Thursday, get in before sunset on Thursday, they should be in good shape. Yeah, and we have been reminding people, if you're flying out, if you're traveling, continue to check on those conditions, call your airlines, things like that. We also have some more questions coming in. Oregon City area, we've kind of been touching on this too, but I've actually had quite a few questions about Oregon City in particular. What can you tell those folks? So, you know, you look at the map here, here's Canby, pretty close to Oregon City. This is by Saturday morning. That's 1/3 of an inch of ice. Tigard, nearly 1/2 inch of ice. Clackamas, over 1/2 inch of ice. So Oregon City, you're right in that pocket between 1/3 of an inch and 1/2 inch of ice from later Thursday afternoon, overnight Thursday, and into Friday morning. It's going to be later Thursday night into Friday morning when we get the bulk of our icing, but it's going to continue throughout the day on Friday. So Oregon City, really not a lot different from what we're going to get in the Portland area this time around. I know in past storms you fared far worse. A lot of times what we see in the Portland area, Brittany, is we'll see this gradient where we get heavy snow in the Gorge in Clark County, some snow in Portland, and then massive icing, Oregon City and Canby. So that may be where that question is coming from. This is not one of those situations where we're going to get a bunch of snow in Clark County and the Gorge, some snow in Portland, then a bunch of ice down south. That's, I wouldn't say common, but we've seen that several times. This is more of a widespread ice event. Okay. And so Holly Wilmont Samples is asking about Sheridan, Wilhelmina, and Grand Ronde area. Yeah, again, so that's the Mid-Valley, and like I said before for Lebanon, you're going to warm up sooner than we will in the Portland area, but I would still expect some ice for you guys, maybe 1/4 of an inch of ice up to 1/3 of an inch of ice before you transition to just plain old rain and warm into the 40s. For the Mid-Valley, say Salem southward, you're going to warm into the 40s, I think, by Friday afternoon. For Portland, it's going to be late Friday night or Saturday. All right, good stuff. Yeah, we have people asking about Salem, so you just covered that. Driving conditions out there, you know, we talk about the differences. Can we go back to that a little bit, talking about the differences from when it's just snow to that freezing rain? There's a big difference for the cars. Huge, yeah. I mean, snow is relatively easy because you can brush it aside. Now, the roads, if the snow gets deep enough, the snow gets compacted by tires and it turns to ice, and you have a lot of problems with snow. I'm not to diminish the impact of a big snowfall, but it's way easier to deal with than freezing rain, because freezing rain, remember, when we say freezing rain, it falls as a liquid, gets everything wet, and then because the temperatures are below freezing, it just coats everything with ice. So you start building up a layer of ice, 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch, more in places like the Gorge, and has happened in the Willamette Valley as well, like it did back on Valentine's Day of 2021. So that's why freezing rain is so much different. So snow, you know, you can deal with, you can shovel it, you can brush it aside, you can clear roadways much more easily. Even the highway crews have a harder time dealing with thick ice on the roads. Sleet is kind of in between because those are ice pellets that fall. The problem is if it's not too far below freezing, you get a little bit of melting and then refreezing with sleet, and then that just turns into a solid layer of ice anyway. So sleet's not much better than freezing rain, maybe a little bit better, but freezing rain, as anybody who has experienced a big freezing rainstorm, is the absolute worst, because it really turns everything into an ice rink. All right, we just got a couple more questions. We have a little bit more time. So Josh Pierce has just an interesting question. He says, when is the last time that we had dew points this low and ice this heavy? I'm kind of putting you on the spot here. But yeah, no worries. It's fine. I think that as I remember, last year we had a snow event in February, but I think it was probably February of 2021 when we had that big ice storm. I mean, remember, we had over an inch of ice in the Mid-Valley, Oregon City, Salem, that area. I drove through Santiam Pass in the spring of 2021, April, May, something like that, before the leaves were fully out. And the trees, literally, it looked like a war zone. I mean, everything was just snapped clear up Santiam Canyon because they had so much ice. So that storm in February of 2021 was a big one. That had a major impact, especially on the Mid-Valley, and we had dew point temperatures down in the single digits that time too, I believe.
All right, well, that is all the time that we have for now. Of course, Matt Zaffino will be keeping you updated here on social media and on KGW. Tune in at 11 o'clock for the latest live updates. And thanks to everybody for tuning in.